The Puerto Rican occupation movement of the early and mid 1970s on the Lower East Side, which
right. Oh. Okay, maybe we'll have Frank response to that.
Oh, what he's referring to is on the Lower East Side in the 70s, the Young Lords, and in East Harlem, Operation Move-In. There's a film out there somewhere called Operation Move-In where the Young Lords occupied a number of buildings and a church and so forth. So, you know, direct action for a home and for community space, you know, has been going on. Obviously, there's in Portland, there's stuff happening there, on the West Coast, Philadelphia, you know, there's a bunch of stuff happening. But what we should remember is that that movement is part of a global movement, which there's some differences and so forth, but according to the UN Office for Human Settlements, UN Office for Human Settlements tracks, you know, what do they call them? Unofficial, there's another word. Informal settlements, so-called informal settlements around the world. They track squatting around the world, basically. The Office for Human Settlements. 3/4, the greatest migration of human beings in the history of the planet over the last 3 decades has been from the country into the cities. People are migrating to the cities. No city in this world is meeting the housing needs of people. Nairobi, Lima, anywhere you go around the world, right? What do you have? Giant circles of squatters, right? All the people living in these all around the urban centers. 3/4 of the world's poor, as we speak, are living in houses they made themselves. All right, 3/4 of the world's poor. So the movement towards, you know, actualizing the human right to a home, which otherwise remains abstract through squatting, is a global phenomenon, right? It has different aspects. Here in New York City, and the U.S., which is the capital of repression and pain and advanced, you know, technological military apparatus to keep us down, it's maybe a little more difficult. But nonetheless, and no city in the world has the kind of shelter system and counterinsurgency directed against poor people, sophisticated in its depth of evil, that this country has. So, you know, we're up against some serious obstacles here in this particular place, but nonetheless, this is a worldwide phenomenon.
I just had a question regarding the laws. Because I don't know how the laws work over here. What's the law around squatting? Are you allowed to squat? Are you definitely not allowed to squat? Do they solve
Very
it with
briefly,
local
I
laws?
once asked William Kunstler that, and Ron Kuby, who's since become famous on the radio now. But there's no affirmative squatting law in this country. I mean, there's an adverse possession, which is rooted in common law. Right. You're in a place for 10 years, and actually 13th Street squats. And what Matt and Pete are going to talk about at Pete's Candy Store, when on Tuesday? Monday. Adverse possession. You're there for 10 years, and you can show that you've been open and notoriously there, and you have receipts to prove you've been there, blah, blah, blah. You can argue in a court that you take ownership through adverse possession, right? But under capitalism, there is no affirmative law to occupy private property. It's a contradiction to their whole shit and their whole system. But on the legal front, there is a very thin legal maneuver that the Lower East Side squatters made use of, and that's known as the 30-day law, right? And that's the only thing that, you know, from a legal point of view that we were able to maintain. But it came into play. What that says is that if you can show that you've been in a place for 30 days or more through the receipt of mail, right? Then you are kicked over by the local cop on the block. What are you doing here? You know, you're not a trespasser. You're a resident. Once you move from trespasser status to resident status through, oh look, we have, and this happened. A few cops have come to the door. You know, these guys can tell you stories. I mean, they come to the door. Bureaucrat, we're from the city. You're in our building. You know, no, look, we have mail, and we've been here for a while. We'd actually send the city certified mail telling them that we were there, so that it would date the time we were there. So after 30 days, we could show, no, they knew we were there and they didn't come. You see? So that 30-day law enabled us to get over that initial hump, moving from trespasser to then it's a due process game. Then they got to evict you legally. Not that that stopped them from so-called self-help evictions through RoboCop, because we have some of that as well, as you know.
Yeah, Marta was.
Is it still like that though?
The 30-day law, I was at a meeting the other day with some on another issue, And one of the people in the room was complaining about a roommate that had moved into their apartment and started getting mail, and then the relationship went sour, and the guy said, well, I can stay here now because I'm getting mail. And she said, yeah, you have to be aware of that because there's the 30-day law. And I said to her, that's still going? And she said, oh yeah, it's 30-day law. So, you know, it's this whole idea of how do you prove residency to a cop? A guy, you come by, and you're there with a mask and a crowbar, and you know what I mean? It's one thing, but if you can say, we used to open the door and show the ground floor apartment, we put a couch and a picture on the wall, and show some mail and say, see, look, we're living here, we have mail, we've been here, get a public hall account from Con Ed, establish residency through the receipt of mail over the first 30 days, and then continue. It can get you over that initial confrontation. That initial point.
I think we have a question. Sorry. Let him.
It doesn't matter if it's residential or an office space or.
That needs to be tested. Maybe somebody has some additional knowledge. As far as I know, that applies really anywhere. It's really, are you treated as a trespasser and you're there like as a thief or whatever, or do you actually reside in the place? You see, and if the local police, unless they're hierarchically, you know, these are hierarchical organizations, military police, they're given an order, and then they come with 150 of them, and they're going to come on you. But the local, no, they in their police regs, they actually differentiate between residents and trespassers, and it'll literally say lives in an apartment, has a picture on the wall, and so forth. Okay.
Has anyone ever heard of 9/10 law? Possession is 9/10 of the law. That's often felt to be like that's the squatters' rights law, whereby people, if they're in there, then they got a certain right, 9/10 of the law. But actually, the origins of that in Anglo-Saxon housing law is so that the king would get his say. It's kind of a mechanism by where you can get your day in court, but actually it's there because they don't want landlords taking self-help actions to evict you from a property in which the king is the sovereign and gets to say in court what's going on.
You have a question a minute ago?
Yeah, in that this being an international movement, and I'm surprised to hear the information that you put out in terms of that we can track of these occupations. What would be the wisdom, in fact, what is the wisdom in publicizing these events so that different people can be aware and take part in this, or, in fact, would that endanger people in this movement?
I'm not sure I understand.
This is a lot of this is like word of mouth. It's not like, it's not like there's a website people can go to and figure out where they can start squatting at, you know what I mean?
Not yet.
Right.
We used to put ads in the Village Voice.
Really? Okay.
And it's soon to be, and actually I do agree that it's something that, well, there's a big issue with the centralizing information, and actually people are very skeptic to that idea of centralizing, but I believe that one of the ways that this could really help is actually centralizing information, not ideas. I think it's a very diverse group, and if you start to centralize politically, you would get into a huge problems. But I think that just giving information out, there's new media that could help us to just tweet something, there's an empty building in the Bronx, we need people to come in, things like that. And that's something that I'm working with, and I'm working with actually with Frank about on this, and I believe it's something important, and it's something that it's very delicate for the same reason of centralizing information, which I think it's something that I don't want to open the discussion, but yeah, I think that's probably the way that we should go, is kind of have a place where we can all communicate. There's actually several of them, and actually I don't know if we have to open a new one or we have to work with the ones that are already there, which is something better, like why opening a new community space or why opening a new network if we can work with what already is there, that's also an important thing to bring. Yeah?
I have a legal question for both the French and for Frank.
The French.
The French squatters. We've already taken one building, a group of friends and myself, and our problem isn't the police department, because in the Bronx, 4-7 has bigger problems like collecting money. It's true. Our issue is the fire department. Fire department's got a whole other scenario. Okay, so if you don't have certified wiring, certified plumbing. The fire department's actually in charge of plumbing, we found out. Certified, yada yada. You have to have certification that your fire escape is actually operational, believe it or not. And, no, if you get on the fire escape and the thing comes out and you fall, it can be like a problem.
Right.
So, my question is, are the coding scenarios in New York City and the coding scenarios in Europe squatting both kind of equivalent? What are your experiences in both areas with dealing with getting up to code and satisfying that?
Maybe I'm sure Frank has a very good answer because we've talked about this actions with the police, with the firemen. But maybe Alan, can you ask them over there? How is the code and how are the cops or the fire department involved in this in Europe?
Well, that's an extremely technical question. I think it bears more on house projects. Or visited in Berlin a couple of weeks ago that are basically residential applications. They have contracts, cities are normalized, and they're required to do certain things. But generally speaking, in Europe, the buildings are in far better condition when they're taken than they are in the U.S. Or in New York. Yeah, so this one that we are in, La General, is an old school. People are technically not supposed to live here, so it's a working space, like a Soho Loft in the 1970s. So these code issues are not up front, as they are in residential buildings in New York.
Okay. Yeah, we have.
Beatrice has something to add.
I just have a question for folks in the room, I guess.
One second. Beatrice wants to add something. Give me a second, let's see. Hello, Beatrice. Louder, please. Yeah, get closer to a computer, please.
Maybe what could be said about La General and what is significant here for the squat culture is that has been functioning as a decentralized structure. It means that from its beginning, everyone would initiate projects and invite people and bring new things. That's why it was constructed here.
It's not. Sorry, Beatrice. We cannot hear you, and unfortunately we cannot.
Gosh, you need to speak in
Yeah,
front of the microphone.
No, we cannot hear her, and actually we have a couple of minutes, so we're gonna move forward. Alan, I'm sorry to not give you voice over there, but we're gonna play with the people who made it all the way here first. And
Sebastian, can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Just one quick sentence for David, which is that the fire department has been utilized in a kind of politicized way. We have various cases where, we had a small fire in one of the buildings, everybody's out of the building, they put the police barricades on there, they put out the fire on a ground floor rear apartment, and then right behind the fireman leaving, SWAT comes in and we're not allowed back in the building. Or they'll punch a hole in the front of the building and run water through the front, and then the vacate order is collapsed ceilings in the front of the building when the fire was in the back and the rear. There's all kinds of bullshit that goes on there. But the technical point here is that is there a vacate order? In what way is the fire department trying to push you out of the building? It could be a vacate order. And if you can meet the requirements of the vacate order, which need to be stated explicitly, and get an architect to say, no, this is bullshit. In other words, you gotta get their vacate order, get the particulars that are on that vacate order, do that work, correct it, and get your architect and your lawyer in there and so on. But bottom line is you got to reoccupy the place and create a fait accompli. We're back in here, but don't try to come with the bullshit vacate order because we've already taken care of those things. Yeah. Have them certified. We've done that.
Maybe you want to say your name.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Kevin. How's it going? I got here. I just want to say thanks first off for putting all this together. It's very much appreciated. I got here kind of late, so I don't know exactly what was discussed beforehand, and I will admit that I feel kind of silly. I was a bit apprehensive to even ask this question, but I think, you know, in terms of just New York City squatting in the post-Giuliani era, and specifically during the 2000s, I was wondering